Okay, so it's coming up to 7:30, and as we said, there are 53 images to assess. The object of this assessment isn't to score them or to rank them. The object was to give some assessment so that if you want to use these images in the future, there are Alan, Keith and myself who are going to have something to say about them, hopefully in a positive way to try to help improve those images. It's a bit real for someone like me to be telling someone like Julie or Carol, you know, how to improve, or Ken how to improve his landscape when they're already streets ahead of me. But it's simply sometimes an opportunity for a different set of eyes to look at an image and see something different in that image than the author themselves may see. So, so please bear that in mind when, certainly when I have anything to say about anybody else's image. It's what I see in it, and anyone can ignore what I have to say, and it's not a problem for me. So we've got 53, and we're going to begin with one of the assessors doing the lion's share of the assessment of the first image, and then the other two assessors having a comment to make if they so wish, but it's going to have to be brief. And then we're going to go to the next assessor and so on. So you'll see how it works as we go along, hopefully. So we'll kick off, if we may, yeah. And so Alan is going to start.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll kick off then, because I appreciate we got quite a lot to get through. I'm not certain what the title is, because there's no title on the screen. But can you read it out, Richard?
Yeah, this is Bodhi Reflection.
Okay, thank you. I like the composition. I like the angle that the author has taken, because it's quite a low down, looking slightly up. I think that works very well. Capturing the cloud. The exposure is pretty good. I spent a long time looking at the mirror on the old vehicle in the foreground, and does it add to the image or doesn't it? I think if the mirror was a little better and it wasn't quite so corroded, I think it would probably strengthen the overall pictorial quality of the image. For me, the mirror, because it is a bit corroded, I think maybe just distracts a little bit from the overall quality of this image, but I like it a lot. That's me finished. Anyone else?
Yeah. The only comment I was going to make is that I wasn't sure whether the main aspect, because it's called Bodhi Reflection, was the mirror and the car, and whether if the building in the background was less sharp, it might add emphasis to the fact that it's a reflection and it's from an old wagon.
And my comment is to agree with David, actually. I thought it was a bit two images in one. I was getting a bit distracted either by the building in the background or by the one in the mirror, and my eyes was flitting from one to the other. May not be a bad thing, but I think what David said, just to mute the background one, would have helped in the overall feel of the image, and concentrate your eye on the reflection in the mirror, which after all was the title of the image.
Okay. The next
Yeah,
image, the next image is, if it will come, Il pleut.
Yes, well, it certainly is plurring in this image. We're left in no doubt that it's raining, and the characters within the image are all with their brollies. It's a grey and a dark day by the looks of things. There's a bit of illumination in the Eiffel Tower. The movement all around, I think, works very well. I like the fact that it's monochrome too, because it seems to suit this image. What I'm a little bit concerned with is that when you've got an image which contains a lot of moving subjects, there needs to be something that's really sharp, and the stationary subject here really needs to be really sharp. And I think it was handheld with a fairly slow shutter speed, which has resulted in the Eiffel Tower itself being slightly soft. And it could have done with just being a bit sharper. I don't know whether it's possible to sharpen it. But the other thing is, in the bottom left-hand corner of the image, there's something which is which I can't make out, but it just looks rather strange, and it looks like the end of a film or something, you know. And it certainly doesn't add to the image. And once you see it, you keep looking at it. So I think that that could be cropped out of the bottom, you know, the left-hand side of the image could just be brought in a fraction to get rid of that. But otherwise, I like it, and I like the way that, you know, you've got this obvious movement with this this beautiful Eiffel Tower in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I love it too. I think it's a lovely atmospheric image. I agree with David. I think if you're going to do this sort of thing, it does really work, but you do need something to anchor it. And in this case, the Eiffel Tower would need to be sharp just to finish it off. And the little bit in the left-hand corner is just a tad distracting.
Yep, I can only agree with everyone else. I am an ICM aficionado, so I absolutely love the ICM aspect of it. It gives a lot of sense of movement of the crowds moving towards the Eiffel Tower, and I think it's really, really effective. Monochrome also works well as well, because there's no distraction with colour. And so, yep, I support what the other people have said. I think it's a fantastic image.
I'll just say finally, I think the angle that the author's chosen is also very good, that low angle.
That's a good point, yeah.
Okay. David joined us.
Okay, this is to take the lead on this one, and very appropriately too, because I absolutely love minimalism in photography. This got a real feel of Michael Kenner about it, if you know that photographer, well-renowned minimalist photographer in black and white, and also does a lot of Japanese work as well, which this has the title of, which I won't even attempt to say, but we've got a sort of translation calling it Strong Heart. So this, I found the composition worked really, really well. I love the negative space on the left-hand side there. I know not every judge would agree with that, but because it's a minimalist photograph, I think it works really well to have that space on the side of the tree. It's space in which the tree is growing into as well, so that works really well. The only comment I did have, and Richard, I don't know if you've received the additional images.
No.
Okay, never mind, because I felt that the rock on the right-hand side had some interesting features in it, and I messed about with this in Photoshop, and I found just by increasing the contrast and the brightness that you got more detail in that rock face on the right-hand side. And also you sharpened up the tree itself. The blacks are a bit blocked in at the moment, but if you increase the contrast and the brightness, then you get separation in the leaves and the foliage, still in silhouette, which is the effect that's being looked at here, but it brightened the sky behind, which I thought is a bit grey as it is, and it brought out the tree.
Thanks, Keith.
Okay. I don't have a lot to add, but I do agree that the issue for me was that the tree could be just lightened a fraction to get a bit more detail in it, because it is minimalist, but what's in it we want to look at, and looking at the detail in there just helps a bit.
Yeah, I agree with Keith. I think the tree for me was just a little bit too blocked up. I think there's a fair amount of detail in the rock face, but yeah, maybe lightening it up would enhance it. The other thing I think I would do is just put a slight, or increase slightly the vignette on it, just to keep it all together, just round the edges. But I think the negative space that you've achieved works well in the composition.
Okay, the next image is Autumn Reflections, Buttermere.
I think that's me. Very much a classic landscape. Suffers a bit from the contrails, and I think you either love those or hate them, although they're a fairly easy fix in Photoshop now with the spot healing brush. I think I'd have given it a little bit more on the bottom. I think you've got some lovely rocks as a leading line, which work very well to anchor your picture down, but I think I just have left a little bit more so you can see the reflection of the left-hand rock. And if you're going to cut rocks off, I think you're probably better off taking them off. So the right-hand one, I personally would just clone it out, because I think part of a rock really is just judge bait for a judge to point it out. And finally, I think you could get a lot more out of this image in terms of the fells. I would selectively, if you've got Lightroom, certainly the brush in Lightroom would do this job. And I would work on some of the trees and the fells, because there's some amazing colours in there, which I think we could pull out. But that's not me.
I agree completely with Alan. I think, yep, the background fells there with the colours and the trees need to be lifted just a little bit, because you've got the really bright lake there in the foreground, and you just need to lift that background, which after all is the subject of the image, and that can easily be done, as Alan says, in Lightroom.
Yeah. I've got nothing more to add on that. I agree with those, and the rock on the right hand side there, which is a bit of a distraction.
The next image is Fox.
Yeah, now this, I need to tell everyone, is the first of 3 images of foxes, and we're going to deal with them individually. But so this one is an enviable image, really. I'd love to just have the opportunity to take such an image, and I think it's a wonderful, sharp image with a fox with real character here, doing something other than just looking at the cameraman. The teeth are there, showing what they're for. Its nose is, I've got some echoing here. Its nose close to the ground, and I think it's a really good poise. Its front left paw is off the ground, and it really looks as though it's going to pounce, or it means business. And I think it's got a lot going for it. There's very little I could say about this image which is in any way detrimental. I like the fact that it's a low camera angle. The camera's really low down. It's a vole's eye view almost. It's pin sharp wherever it needs to be. And if there was anything at all that I think might enhance the image, and that is if the yellow element was reduced a little bit, because I think that there is so much green, yellowy green, all the way around this beautiful animal, that I think if it could be just toned down a fraction, you'd get even more dynamism of this fox.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Certainly tone down the yellows and the greens a little bit. The other thing, I think for me, I would increase the tonal contrast on the fox. I think it would bring it out. It has a certain, it's not soft, but it kind of looks a bit soft because of the lack of contrast. And I think a bit more contrast breathed into the fox would make it jump out at you.
Okay, so this is...
I won't add any more because I'm going to comment on the next image, which is very similar. Okay, so this is the next image. I love the body shape here. I love the fact that the fox is engaging with the photographer. You can see his eyes clearly, not looking perhaps directly at the photographer, but looking in that direction anyway. And the fact that that right paw is lifted off the ground just gives it a sense of movement. So I love the whole body shape in this image. I prefer this one to the previous one for those reasons. Alan's already made the point about the contrast, and I popped it into Photoshop and increased the contrast. At the moment, it looks like the flank of the animal is the sharpest point in the image. That's not actually quite true. It's the contrast which is the problem. And if you just increase the contrast in Photoshop, then the eyes pop, and the head, it becomes much sharper to the eye. Then again, I would reiterate what David said, the greens need toning down. And again, so very easily done in Photoshop. You just decrease saturation and increase the depth of the color, and just to darken down the background. And then the fox really pops out and it looks like it's coming at you, and it's a superb image. And absolutely love this one of the fox. Mm.
Yeah, nothing to add to what Keith has said. I think apply all those things to this image and it will actually be stunning.
Okay.
So I think I've got one now.
Yeah, third fox.
So third fox. Well, this one, clearly some work has been done, or at least this is the way it was taken, because as you can see, the head is much more powerful, much sharper, a lot more sort of contrast breathed into it. But sadly, the depth of field is such that the body falls away and almost disappears into the background, which is a bit of a shame, and there's not much you can do about that. I think maybe some selective, again, tonal contrast work on the body will help to bring it away from the background, and then as has been suggested with the others, a little darkening down of the background, reducing the green, will make it stand out. I think the head and face is so powerful that as an image, I think probably with a bit of work done to the body in the background, it will work very well on its own.
I really absolutely agree with all that Alan said.
I just don't think it has the same compositional strength as the other two, with it looking straight at the camera. It's a smaller image within the frame. And I just don't think it quite, for me, it just doesn't quite have that composition that does. And I'm not sure about that stance being an attractive element.
Hmm. I'm not sure if we're meant to judge which one is the best of the three, but for my money, the second one I would say was the strongest.
And I like the first one.
I'm not going to put the last one.
Okay.
This is Cavendish Memorial.
Another mono for me. I like this very much. I think it's a really strong image. I like the way that this memorial is just off center, that the trees sort of will create this sort of diagonal down from the foreground tree to the background trees, and this almost minimalist approach to this wintry scene. I think it really provides a really attractive composition.
I don't know if it is infrared or not. It's got that sort of feel about it, but it's definitely minimalist, like David says, and I absolutely love it and can find no fault whatsoever with it.
No, I agree. It has that infrared feel to it, but I love the way it falls away to the sides. I think I would personally put a bit of a vignette just around it, just to hold it all together. But nevertheless, it's a lovely monochrome.
Mm.
Next is Autumn Mist.
Sorry, that's me, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay. What I love about this landscape is the fact that you get a gradation of sharpness and softness as you go into the distance, which gives it a real three-dimensional feel. I like the way that the tree on the left-hand side there is pin sharp and lots of detail there, so that grabs your attention, and then your eye moves over into the distance, and particularly the mist in the background, which gives it a nice feel. And I think it works really, really well. I couldn't find any fault whatsoever to this. There's nothing I could suggest which would improve it. I think it's a really effective landscape.
Yeah, I agree. It's a stunning landscape, nicely composed, and certainly very strong as far as exposure is concerned. I think the only thing I would say, and again, I like it as it is, but there's a bit of judge bait. Some judges may say the tree breaks the the line of the mountains, and
Yeah.
sometimes people call foul on that, but you know, you can tell them to go and get stuffed, or you can take it to heart. It's a personal thing.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too, but it hardly breaks it. It just breaks the surface. I think if it was lower down, the horizon of the fells through the tree, it would detract. But as it is, it just touches the top. So I thought it was acceptable.
I think it helps to bring the image together. That tree, it brings this foreground, and your eye goes through to the water and the midground with all of those beautiful coloured trees, and then that background mist of the mountains, and it's held together by that tree which dominates the scene. So I don't see it as an issue at all. I think it's a beautiful picture.
Okay. Snack time.
I think this is me. This is a good
Yes.
travel, very strong travel shot. You know, you almost know that you're there by seeing it. I haven't really got much I could add to this. The only thing I would suggest is that the author darkens down the light vegetables, cauliflower, etc., because they do draw your eye away from the person, which is after all what you want us to look at. Certainly, you don't want to be taking them out because it's part of the storytelling, but just darken them down so that our eye is drawn to it. There's a very good tool if you've got Nick software called Dark and Light Center, where you actually select where you want the light to be, and then it's got some controls where you can actually then darken areas around, and obviously you put the center on her face and then work from there, and that would help give you a guide to framing and lighting this picture. But yeah, nice travel image.
Yep, I agree with Alan. Thought it was a really effective travel image. Yep, I noticed the cauliflower as well, but I also noticed those two labels at the top of the image on the attached to the produce that's in plastic bags, and I thought you could select those two labels and just darken them down a touch too. But that would happen in Nick if you use the facility that Alan's just described.
Yeah, I just wish you wouldn't ask me to keep buying various apps to go on this software that we already have, because
it's free. It's free.
She'd be asking me for this now.
It's not free anymore.
It's no longer free.
No.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I'm going to not add to that.
This is inversion on Derwentwater.
Okay. You certainly get the effects of mist in the spring and summer. I nip up to Grange Crags and catch this, and you've always got a very, or almost always have a very clear blue sky in the mornings when this sort of effect is created on the lake. I think that the lake is so calm and well reflected here, and the Abbots Bay, I presume it's Abbots Bay, isn't it, included in the image, I think helps the composition. But I do think that the blue is very blue, and it dominates the image to the extent that the part of the image I really want to be looking at is the mist and Cat Bells and Maiden Moor, and its reflection, and it's almost as though I'm not getting the opportunity to see it as well as I could. So whether it needs a bit of the dark, very dark blue at the base of the image cropping off, or whether it needs that blue toning down a bit, and the as Alan had mentioned before about bringing out the colours, because there are some lovely colours in the trees and in the fells there that could help the image, I think. But it's I like the image very much, and I like that sort of atmosphere with the island, with Derwent Island there being consumed by the mist. I think it's a lovely, peaceful picture. But as I say, I just think that that blue is a bit too bold.
I think there's always a bit of a problem with reflections where we're very tempted to include all of the reflection, and that does two things. One, it kind of gives a mirror image so that the horizon goes right through the middle of the picture. It also gives you a very long, narrow picture as you've got here. I think sometimes you just have to go for broke and say, do you know what, I don't think I want all that reflection. That would overcome the dark blue that David's mentioned. I think it would also take you closer to that little like sand bank spit that comes out, which I think is very interesting, where it breaks through the reflection. I think taking the viewer into that more closely, and then I would bring in a little bit off the left-hand side, slightly closer to the other island there. So it would take away the stretched view of the picture, and I think just give more emphasis to the mountains and the mist.
Yeah, I kind of go along with what the others have said. I'd give it a crop on the bottom there to remove the darkest blue part and move the bottom more up to the foliage on the right-hand side there that's peeping in from the right, which I guess is what Alan's been saying as well. And then maybe tone down the sky just a tad.
Okay. This is Potos flavus, night monkey.
Yeah, the first thing to say is this is not a night monkey. It's a South American animal. It's akin to a raccoon in terms of the family, and it's called a kinkajou. But just to confuse things, the South Americans also refer to it as being a lion monkey or a bear monkey. As I say, it's not a monkey in any sense whatsoever. The reason those names have been attributed to it is because it does have a prehensile tail, and that's why it's been referred to colloquially as a monkey, but it is, as I say, more akin to a raccoon. Anyway, that's by the by. I've got a problem anyway with this image. It's been tightly cropped in. I guess that's because there are distracting elements otherwise around the image. And indeed, you can see another animal positioned behind this one that's in the foreground. So I presume the author wanted to cut out these distracting elements. It's clearly not in the wild. It's clearly captive in some sense, which I find slightly unpleasant, unless the aim is to emphasize the fact that it's captive, because these animals are indeed kept by the South Americans as pets. So perhaps the author wanted to make a statement about that. If that's the case, I think you need to include more of the surroundings to emphasize the fact that this is a captive animal. The cropping has taken off the claws at the bottom, which is slightly unfortunate, but it's relatively minor. But really, it's the way this has been depicted, which yeah, I've got some reservations about.
Yeah, thanks, Keith.
Yeah, for me, I mean, in terms of the image itself, the animal immediately obvious behind the foreground, the main subject animal, if that were darkened down a bit, at least you would have the one animal being portrayed in the way that the author wanted it to be portrayed. And it is a pity that the claws have just been clipped at the bottom, but nothing else to add.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything I can add to what David and Keith have said, really. I think it's a shame that whenever you take this sort of shot, the artificial flash does you know, effectively dominate the way in which the picture is exposed.
Okay. Next is the shipwreck of the Admiral Van Tromp.
Yeah, I think this is down to me. I think this is a strong landscape. I like the elements in this a lot. And I like the way that you've actually exposed it. It's been exposed very well, and it could have been so easily had a burnt out sky and blocked up shadows, but you've got detail in all that sort of area where it would effectively be quite strong shadow. I think the composition works with this lead-in line and then taking your eye in. Just a little note of caution, really. There's some artifacts attach themselves to the two parts that are jutting up in the sky. One of which is a bit of the ironwork on the boat and the rock, if you look closely. And this tends to be because you've used some of the post-processing software quite often, things like Clarity, will do this. It's a pain, but quite easy to rectify. It just means some either when you do it, whenever you apply any of your post-processing software, do it through a layer and then brush it in where you want it rather than just doing the whole image. That way you will avoid that. At this stage, if you want to do it, then clearly through a layer, you could in fact work with the clone tool and just very carefully just go down either side to take those artifacts out, which just spoil what is an exceptionally good image.
I've only just realised that this is fairly low. It's at Saltwind Bay, so it's not just on the northeast coast, isn't it? So it's I didn't know that it was there. It's a fairly recent wreck, but I agree with Alan in that it's a really pleasing image. I think if anything that I would suggest is that it's still possible to get to make that sky even more dramatic than it is, and I think that would help it a little bit more. I think it's a lovely image, so it's better than anything I've ever taken.
I agree with Alan as well. I think it's this superb image. I would agree with the suggestions that Alan's made. I note the compositional elements. There's a diagonal line that runs at the back of the boat from the left-hand side going up to that promontory in the background. I think that works really well, takes your eye through the image. And there's lots of elements in here which, if they weren't there, would displace the image, make it one-sided. There's a tiny little rock near the horizon on the right-hand side that if you take that away, it actually ruins the composition. So the authors purposely kept that there, and it really works in terms of the composition. So there's lots of compositional things going on here which are absolutely admirable.
Okay, thanks. A good day at the office.
Okay. Yes, a good day at the office. As some members will know, I've photographed this individual myself, called him the Rat Man, and I think he's part of an Edwardian group. I photographed him in Lincolnshire a couple of years ago, but I do like the character. I like the way that I like the way this particular photograph has been taken. I like the angle of the character and the way that he's looking over and above the photographer. And the I'm not sure whether this background has been put in, or that the image, that the character has been placed onto the background, and I suspect he has, but it may not have been the case. But I think if there's something that just troubles me fractionally with it, and that is that the whole image lacks shadow. The rat lacks a shadow, and the man lacks a shadow, and it's almost as though it needs one. It needs a bit of shadow somewhere to give it that feeling of unity of image. But I do like the image, and I like the very toned down background with the character brighter and the way that he looks. I think it's a good, strong image.
I think David nailed it when he said that it needs a bit of shadow, because it's got a very strong frontal light, even to the point there's a couple of very nice catch lights in the guy's eyes. And as such, with a frontal light like that, you would have much darker background. So I think by just taking down the background, it would give the appearance of a darker shadow being caused by the body. I think that would be quite an easy fix for this shot.
Yes, spot on. I agree with both those comments. I had the same impression myself regarding shadows, etc. If I was being really, really pernickety, and Alan's had this comment levelled at him before, I'd take out the button on his right leg, or on his left leg, as it is. It's not much of a distraction, but just easily cloned out and taken away.
Judge Bay, always best to get rid of it.
Yeah.
This is a figwort weevil.
It is. I'll take the author's word for it, never having spotted one myself, but I think it's a really strong nature image. I love the positioning of the leaf on that diagonal, and obviously the weevil would sit in the same direction as a diagonal, that provides a real dynamic aspect to this image. The background's nicely subdued, so that the weevil really stands out, and he's absolutely pin sharp all the way through, apart from the its left hand, wherever it is, not an antenna, but maybe it is an antenna or part of a mandible. There's another aspect. The background is nicely subdued. There is this line going from bottom right to the top left, that's nicely subdued, so it doesn't really detract. And if it was anywhere else on the image, I think it would detract. But the fact that it brings the eye almost as a leading line up to the mandibles of the weevil actually works in its favour. So I think it's superb nature image. I couldn't improve it, certainly not. But yeah, really effective.
It's almost like a pair of pin's nay on the nose of this creature, isn't it?
Yeah.
Almost, it renders a comical aspect to it. But I agree, it's a cracking image. I love it's a weird and wonderful image. It's a weird and wonderful creature sitting there pin sharp on that leaf. I just think it's great. So many insects have this pair of, it's almost like they're balancing I don't know, pin's nay on around. Flies have it, don't they? They have a pair of these on the front of their face. But no more to add.
The only thing I would say, I agree with what's been said. It is a crackingly sharp image. I think, if anything, I think it could probably afford a slightly tighter crop. I like the lead-in line, but I think you could probably crop it where you've got the leaf slightly in the bottom left-hand corner, slightly going out in terms of your depth of field. I would personally start the crop there. That would have two things. It would also get rid of some of the greyness, because there's a few grey-white areas on the left-hand side, which I don't think add a great deal to it. That's just me. I think it would just tighten up the crop and make a bigger emphasis of the bug.
I think you might lose the diagonal leaf a bit then.
A tad, but I think it's worth it to give more emphasis to the bug. But that's just my opinion, obviously.
Okay.
Next is drought beck.
Yeah, it's a very subtle waterfall shot, this, isn't it? It's one of these pictures that needs to be as a fine art print. I love the way the light and the water just starts in the top corner there on the left and just comes down and just forms this beautiful shape right down, going round to the right, and then as it splashes back to the left, I think it's superbly handled. The darkening down obviously gives more emphasis then to the water. Whether the darkening is a little heavy-handed is a matter for debate. I think it's a very subtle and very atmospheric picture. I think maybe someone might say, is it a little too dark? But I'll leave that to the author. But I think it's a lovely image.
I agree with Alan, and I also don't think it's too dark. I think it gives atmosphere, and the water really sparkles. It really has huge impact. The only thing I would do if I was fiddling about with it was clone out a few of the dark spots in the water. Light spots in the water. There's one on the left there, and then another one near the waterfall on the bottom right. But that's trivial things, really.
Yeah, I agree with those three spots. They do seem to just distract a fraction, but I love the overall effect, and I like that spout from the top left corner that begins, is the start of the fall. I think it's a really super image. I suppose really I would have it just fractionally lighter. I think the dark is very dark, but I don't have any observations which in any way can criticise that beautiful picture.
Okay. Humpback whale diving.
Whale tail. A simple image, and I mean, it's it would just be great to be there to have the opportunity to take that. I've never been in that situation, I have to say. I like the reflections all the way to the bottom of the picture from the whale's tail. It's, I think, large enough in the frame. It's a big tail, and the fact that you've got all of this water streaming off the back of the tail shows the sort of immensity of the thing. It's probably a tight crop off a much a small part of the image. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a crop of a very small part of a big image, because the actual water running off the tail of this whale is whilst it on closer inspection, it really is quite solid, and it's lost the definition of the spraying water off the tail. But I would imagine that it is some distance from the photographer. But I like the overall effect, and I just like this reflection through the water to the front of the image. If you could get more detail in the actual body of the whale, it would be nice, but I presume that's as much as they can get.
Yeah,
I rather like the tail having the rim lighting behind it. I think that really sets it off, and obviously it then illuminates the water dripping off the back of the tail there. So I thought that was really effective taken. Obviously, exposure compensation has been shifted over to the left, as it were, to emphasize that, and I think it works really, really well. I wasn't sure about the reflections in the water. I'd almost be tempted to take a little bit off the bottom. So I agree it's effective, but maybe too much of it.
Yeah, I'm going to be a Philistine too, and say I think I'd take some off the bottom. As it starts to peter out, I would take that off. Again, that has the benefit of making the image slightly larger in the frame. Obviously, only the author knows whether the image can take enlarging it anymore, but some off the bottom, I think, would strengthen it. The downside of that is obviously it turns it more into a letterbox, but I don't think you can take any off of the left or the right hand side, because I think both of those actually help the composition. So just a bit off the bottom, it's a lovely image.
Okay. Derwent Water Dawn.
Okay, familiar aspect, I'm sure, to all of us, but this is a very effective landscape. I love the fact that the trees on Derwent Isle there really stand out against the receding background, where you've got the mist and the misty hills of Capbells, Maidenmore, etc. in the background there. Obviously, you've got this leading line coming in from the left-hand side of the fence, the wire fence, and a couple of birds sitting on it. And a nice element to have that rock on the right-hand side, which balances the image as a whole. So I thought well put together, exposure's perfect, sharp where it needs to be sharp on the island, really making it stand out. I think, and it was the author's choice, obviously, to leave the foreground shore in, but I'd be tempted to take the shore off and start the image with the fence more or less in the bottom left-hand corner, and the rock on the right, still where it is. But I just looked at it in that orientation and thought it made it a bit stronger, because your eye then just follows the leading line into the island and is not distracted by that foreground. But really, I thought it was a really effective landscape. I like the fact that the trees on Derwent Isle don't break the horizon denoted by the fells in the background. Maybe slightly does on the left, but yeah, not substantially. So it's a good viewpoint from which stands from which to take the image.
Yeah, I agree with Keith on that. I think it's a lovely image. It does. I think it benefits from the beachy bit, the pebbly bit taken off the bottom. And I'd go one step further and suggest that you actually take the other rock on the left-hand side out, so that the actual, which has the effect of taking those two boats out, because I don't think they add anything at all. I think the picture for me is where the mist starts to come through the island and then the mist following through. And I think again, it's a personal view. I think it's a stronger composition with that piece taken off the left and the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting that there's no no criticism of any of the content of that image. Really, the main thrust of it is the island, the mist, and the cap bells, and I think that's really where the image has all of its strengths. They've got the fence as a leading line, but quite frankly, I agree that if it were cropped to take off this at the bottom and the left side, you've got an even stronger image for what the author is showing with the island, the mist, and cap bells behind it.
Okay. Cloud bursting.
I think it's me. Another interesting sort of monochrome landscape. Very powerful light rays coming through from the sky, which has been handled very well. I think the exposure of the sky has been handled well. Some of the other darker areas are a little bit blocked up, which perhaps could benefit from it. The horizon's got a slight lean on it, which would definitely need to be straightened up. And for me, I would take the bottom portion where you can see the lighter area as you go up from the bottom. I would take that dark area off. It's a bit blocked up. It doesn't have any detail in it. And I'd start the picture from the lighter area. And then maybe just have a little look to see whether you've got a little bit more detail in the nearest dark area. I think the rest of them add to the gradation. And I'd just have a little look at that one on the right hand side to see whether that's got just a little bit, just to avoid, again, you having the accusation of blocked up shadow areas.
I think it's got a real strength, the image as a whole. I just love, you start at the right in the middle and you see these rays coming down onto that white line of water, and there's sort of a bit of a spray on the left, and your eyes taken all the way round the image, and it's interesting at all stages, in my view. You've got this gradation on the right through to this white topped mountain, across the clouds and the sky, and down the other side, and I just think everything about that is powerful, and yet it's modest in a way. So I just love the image, and yes, if it did have that bottom inch taken off, it would become much more of a letterbox shape, I suppose, but it doesn't bother me. I just think it's just a powerful and well constructed image.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with David. I think really powerful is a good word for it. It really is a powerful image. I tried in Lightroom just darkening the sky down a bit more to make those rays even more pop out. And I think you could do that, just it would benefit from that a little bit. But yeah, a really powerful and image that stands out.
This is Crested
Serpent
Eagle.
Yeah, I was. I don't know who this is, but if whoever it is, if they're amongst us this evening, I put this in through Camera Raw, and with a bit of tweaking, it made quite a dramatic difference in my estimation, and I'd be quite happy to email it to the author, who could make a comparison, because I believe that the blue is really a little bit too blue, and the detail that you get in that tree and in the bird is brought out significantly just by lightening it a bit. And I sort of went into highlights and shadows and just brought out the detail of the tree by reducing the shadow element there. And I took out that bottom spot. Can you see there's a bit of dust on the sensor, and it takes your eye. Once you see that bottom spot, you just keep looking at it, and that is a little detraction that's so easy to remove with the in Photoshop. with a spot removal tool. But the other thing is that the bird is looking to our left, to its right, and it's placed in the left, our left of the image, with the negative space on the right. It looks so much better if that space is what the bird is looking into. And so what I did was I cropped it and then filled an area to the left of the image as we look at it to make that broader, and the area to the right of the image as we look at it to make that narrower. And the image changed, in my estimation, quite significantly. So it brought out the detail and it positioned it better in the frame. As I say, I'm happy to email it. If you let me know who you are, I'll email you the version that I did, just so you can see a comparison. But I think that that image has got a lot going for it that isn't portrayed in this presentation that we've got before us.
I absolutely agree with David for all the things that he said there. The light that the image was taken in is very challenging because it's a very bright light. I'm sure the author was concerned that if he lightened it up, then he would burn out some sections of the bird's plumage. But as David says, if you play about with highlights and shadows, you can get more. And absolutely, the bird should be looking into more negative space on its right, as David suggests.
Yeah, I can't add anything to that. I mean, the benefit of cropping on the right, obviously you get the sensor mark out at the same time, and then just increasing the canvas size on the left will overcome that. I would also take a bit off the top, but certainly the bird does need to have a bit of work done to bring out the detail in that plumage and the eye, because I think there's probably a lot more detail in that eye.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
the next image is lion.
Okay. I've got absolutely no criticisms whatsoever with this image. I think it's faultless. If we were doing a competition, this would be my best of show. I think it's an absolutely fantastic image. All the detail in that prowling lion, you really get a sense of lion in inverted commas, just from its stance. Love the fact that its left paw is just lifted up there, so you've got a sense of it moving towards you quite threateningly. It looks as though it's been placed against a textured background, so it's not a pure nature photograph, but that doesn't detract whatsoever from the image as it's shown here. I like the light coming in from the lion's left there. You can just see a bright area on the left of it, which is where you can imagine the sun's filtering through, and then you get that lovely shadow cast at the bottom there, which emphasizes the three-dimensionality, really, of the image. I think it's absolutely beautiful image.
Yeah, for me, I would just darken down that shadow a bit, and that sort of bottom left-hand area. I think the lighter area competes a little bit with the rest of it, but that's only a very small point.
I agree. It's probably for me, the best image of the evening. And what can I say? I just think it's a superb. It just goes to show that shadow, very pale though it is, what a difference it makes. And it takes us back to the Ratman picture, you know, Good Day at the Office. And the difference between having that bit of shadow and not having the shadow is the difference between it being a sort of, as Keith says, a sort of a three-dimensional image and slightly flat. And it's a good example of it. I mean, it's a really superb picture.
Okay, we're now on to image 22, which is Waiting for the Rain.
I think that's me. I think the sky has been handled very well indeed. You can actually almost feel the raindrop that's about to fall from that storm sky. So the top half of the picture, I think, is very strong. The trees have got some nice detail in, and I think you've handled the exposure very well. But the bottom half of the picture, the fields, although there's some leading lines there, for me, it's a little bit sort of dull. So I think there's no obvious easy fix for this. You could selectively do some work and perhaps darken and lighten, so you make those furrows a little bit stronger to give you a stronger diagonal. But for me, I think I would just take about a third of that where it dips down. I would take that off because I think that would give you more emphasis on the sky, which is really what you want us to look at, and the trees. And I like the gradation of the mountain range in the background. I think that also helps very much with the composition. And I just lose some of the field at the bottom.
Slightly disagree with Alan there. My attention was taken by that wonderful field and the furrows in it, and your eye sort of glides along over that gradual swell of the land down there. So me personally, I wouldn't take much off the bottom. I think that's really part of the image. Of course, the sky's there and it's fantastic, but I think the bottom half is also pretty stupendous too. So yeah, sort of minor disagreement with Alan on that one.
I also think that the fact that it pretty much lies the horizon on the third there, I think it's got a very good balance to it, and it is waiting for the rain. It's very much about that wonderful sky and the rain clouds, and the textures in the sky are really quite fantastic. I think if it became a more dominant feature by taking anything off the bottom, I think it would perhaps lose the balance as far as I'm concerned. And I also like that undulation across the land with those furrows in. I think they work for me.
Okay. Next is the Faces of History.
Now, this is an image that was taken during our recent Camera Club visit to Berlin. And it's an image which is sort of stacked with emotion, because these metal faces are to be walked on. And as you walk on them, they make a noise which is supposed to represent the voices of the murdered Jews during the Second World War. I've thought about this and I've created a monochrome image of this, but I think it works as a colour image insofar as you get that texture and the colour of the redness in the rust of these faces. And I also think that the character that's just leading away from the picture, this ghostly character almost, would be lost if it was monochrome. And because there's just this hint of blue, you just see this character disappearing. It's almost a ghostly character. So I think it's a strong image. Now, there is this reflection of a face in the centre or the top third there, and I'm not exactly sure that I'm not sure that it works. I think it perhaps caricaturizes or creates a caricature of something which is quite somber. So I'm not really sure about that. But I've got to be careful what I say about this image, because I think the author is not very far away.
Thanks, David.
I can obviously also relate to it, because I too was there. And yes, it is a very moving place. And I think the author has captured very much the mood of this memorial. I do agree with David, and I'd go one step further, that I think that ought to be cloned out, because I think it spoils the overall feel of having the reflection of one of the faces part way up in the window there. I just think your eye's drawn up to it, and that's not what your eye wants to do. Your eye wants to follow these very strong lines right across these clinker metal plates with faces on to the figure. And I think that, for me, is what the picture's all about. I think it works well in a portrait mode, and I would personally just clone out that face.
I can't disagree with any of that. I also noticed the reflection and thought that should be cloned out. I wondered whether it might be more effective in mono, but I accept what David has said about the figure, because the figure is absolutely essential in this image, and all the line in the architecture, all lead down to that figure. There's one on the right, one on the left coming down as diagonals, and they all converge on that figure. That figure is absolutely crucial to the image, and yeah, you need to be able to see it.
Next is Langstrath Beck.
Okay, yeah. So part of the Lake District I know quite well, down in Borrowdale, Langstrath Beck, and the actual waterfall cascades, if anyone knows them, are much broader than is shown here. But I really appreciate that the author's taken a portrait view of it, because that really emphasizes the water coming down from the center there, curving down at the bottom and to the left and then to the right again. So I think that's really effective in describing the waterfall. I also love the fact that you can see all the detail in the rocks. So the exposure has been really well handled in the fact that you can see all the texture and detail in the rocks, but none of the water is at all blown out, and you get some detail in the smoothed, of course, by a slow shutter speed, but still the detail is there in the water. And I think the judgment there on the exact speed to denote the water is absolutely spot on. So I was wondering whether you could take a little bit off the top, but I wouldn't want to clip any of that tree that's growing up there on the left-hand side. So it's not a big deal for me. I'm quite happy with it as it is. And I think it's a very effective and well composed landscape.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I also like this. I think it's Langstrath rather than
it is Langstrath. Yeah.
So it's Langstrath. One of the really interesting parts of this waterfall, as I see it, is the bottom half of it. Now, and I just wondered if this has been cropped at all, that if that bottom left-hand corner where the water seems just to go out of the side of the image, if that is capable of being captured, it would be good to have that in there. I think if the water is swirling round over this little bottom cascade of water, because when I look at that, I just feel as though the water's going off the edge of the picture there. But other than that,
thanks, David.
I just like the composition, and I also think that you need some of the context of the fell side above it.
I like it. I agree with Keith that I think the author has got certainly the shutter speed about right. For me, the exposure is absolutely spot on. What lets it down, which is really nothing in the control of the author, is that the light is incredibly flat.
Yeah.
The thing is with landscape photography, as anyone will know, and certainly talk to Ken Reddy, author, because I'm sure this isn't Ken's, is that what makes a landscape as well as the composition is the light, and it's the combination of the light and your composition that comes to the final image, which will or will not do very well. And in this instance, you've got all the elements. Your composition, the way you've handled the exposure is spot on. But what hasn't really worked for you is the light. Now, you can artificially, again, if you've seen some of Ken's talks, you can artificially put light and dark into your images to give them a lot more punch. And what I would commend you do is to look at this image and try that. Just experiment to try and darken some areas, lighten some areas where you think you'd like the light to be, and see how that works. And you'd be amazed that it will actually give you a far more punchy picture.
Okay, thanks. Next image is called Elgol.
This is me. A long exposure, very long exposure monochrome here. Very strong foreground. You can see just the water reduced to almost just a light mist. And you can see the effect it has on the clouds. They're rather light clouds that have had a long exposure. I think that's quite a nice effect. Again, this has suffered a little bit from the lack of light. but being monochrome, it is stronger in the sense that you're using the slow shutter speed of the water to give you the light, which is coming through in that white milkiness. I think this would benefit from selective lightening and darkening to put a little bit more tonal contrast into this to give it that little bit more punch, just to lift it. And I certainly would try to put a little bit of light into the background mountains, which are at the moment, on my screen anyway, looking rather flat and blocked up. But I think the composition and the way you've set your foreground are very strong indeed, and it's certainly worth spending a little bit more time, if you can, to bring out some more of the detail in the background mountain range.
I sort of agree with most of what Alan's just said. For me, the images seems a little busy. There's a lot of elements to look at, and I'd be tempted maybe to take a little crop off the bottom. I mean, the foreground's very effective, yes, but it's rather competing with the rest of the image, to my mind, and I would have taken a little bit off to bring the bottom up more towards that central boulder, that JCB there in the middle, just to simplify the image a little.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the foreground is very bold and dark, and it's the main focus of attention when you look at the image. I think that if it began at the boulder rather than of the stones beyond the boulder, then I think it would help. But you've got two. It's like there's a Y shape of water leading through that gap, and then it leads into this white or light area of water to the slightly dark, foreboding mountains in the background. I think they would be better if they were a bit lighter. But I love the cloud, the effect of the clouds as the movement of them with this long exposure.
Okay. Next image is undercarriage down for a soft landing.
Yeah, now this is almost the midway point, and I'll talk about this image before we go on, but it's now taken more than an hour to do less than half of the images. So I think Alan and Keith and I need to speed up a bit, otherwise people will be asleep before we get to the end. Can I look at this image? This is called undercarriage down for soft landing, which is referring to the bee. But for my money, the strength of the image is in this beautiful poppy with the dark or black, almost black background, and from opaque to almost transparent petals. It is a wonderful image. I just love the flower itself, and it's almost for me as though the bee with the undercarriage down is almost a distraction to what otherwise would be a strong image of a poppy. And the undercarriage down for soft landing gives the impression that it is the focus of the image, whereas I think it's an add-on. Okay.
Me or Keith?
Yep, I'll chip in. Sort of agree with David, but sort of not. I thought the bee did lend a sort of narrative feel to the image. Otherwise, it would be a very effective, I agree, still life of the poppy. The poppy is superb, but I personally thought the bee did add something. As I say, I think it added a little narrative feel to it, and I didn't find it a distraction.
Me neither. I think the bee is, for me, what lifts it above a picture which is relatively ordinary, even though the lighting captured on the poppy is beautiful. I like the light on the bee as well, and I just think the two together make a very pleasing composition and pictorial image.
Yeah, perhaps it's the title.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Do we want to break for 5 minutes?
Okay, I don't mind.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Great Spotted Woodpecker. Very well caught. Nice separation between the birds, but they're obviously engaging with one another as a preliminary to whatever's going to take place next. Both birds are absolutely pin sharp. and with catch lights in their eyes. The background is suitably blurred with the depth of field. The fence in the front, I didn't find too obtrusive. You can't crop it from the bottom because you'll lose the tail of Mrs. Woodpecker there on the right. So a superb nature photo, and a little narrative feel to it as well.
I think we have to get the story right. It's a male on the right, as we look at it, and it's a chick on the left.
Oh, thank you very much.
The chicks have...
Never commit yourself, Keith. You're always careful. That's why I never do.
Yeah. The male has the red at the back of the head, and the chick has the red on the top of the head, and the female doesn't have red on the head. All right.
Okay. Thank you for that.
But anyway.
So why is it called? Oh, I see. They can still bond if they're.
Yeah, but it's a Mr. and chick, and I also like this relationship that's between them. It is bonding, aptly called, and I just think it is unfortunate that it's on the fence rather than on the branch, but that's where they were.
Yeah, it's a lovely picture, though. Again, I know I keep banging on about vignettes, but I would darken the corners down. I think the light corner on the top left is so easy to fix, and in so doing, I think the fence would blend a little bit better if you darkened the whole round with a vignette.
I agree with that.
I think
we have Jackdaw at the Nest.
A bit of an unusual nature mono for a change, and a very unusual shot in the way it's taken. Obviously, the author wanted to get some symmetry into it. Well, I'm a Philistine, so I want to break your symmetry by taking some off the right, so that the actual bird is looking to my left. I think that would strengthen it, and I would also take a bit off the top again, which I think would just strengthen the overall shot. I love the texture you've got into the nest and the bird. I like the fact that you have done something very, very different. But I don't personally, other than for the symmetry effect, I don't think it needs the amount of the brickwork on the right.
Personally, I like square formats, and square formats almost demand that you have the subject in the centre. And so I'd solve the problem that Alan has just mentioned with a vignette around the outside, so that you darken down the outer limits of the stonework and just dampen that down.
I just love it for what it is. It's just such an unusual shot, and the bird has managed to turn to his best side for the photographer, and I just think it's such an unusual shot. It's an unusual situation. I just think it's a really strong picture.
Yeah.
Next, I'm Going with the Flow.
One of my favourite pictures of the evening probably comes next to the lion. I just love this. I like the diagonal that goes from bottom left through to top right.
Yeah.
You've got this strong, almost broad brush strokes going from left to right. You've got the wonderful white water as the water splashes down, and none of it is burnt out. Alan was talking about, light earlier. This has just got that sparkle of light in the top left-hand quarter of the image, which sort of provides this wonderful light that also is producing these colours throughout the right-hand third of the image. The grey and bluish sort of lines dropping down with the waterfall. I just think it's superb. There's absolutely nothing there that I could wish to challenge or change. It's a great image.
I agree with everything David said. I think the way the author has captured the light in the water is absolutely superb. It wouldn't be like this unless you were photographing this kind of peaty water, but by selecting this type of water to give it this effect, just with the absolutely spot on shutter speed, you've created a beautiful picture, and this as a fine art print would be stunning.
Yep, absolutely agree with all that. These are the sort of things that I'm sort of things that I take all the time. Absolutely love this kind of an image, and this is a spectacular example of it.
Next, we have young grizzly in an ample.
Okay, I think this is me. This is superbly taken in terms of the shutter speed to capture the rainfall coming down and it bouncing off the fur of the bear. Everything's sharp that needs to be sharp. That is the trees in the foreground, the bear obviously, but the background is, because of depth of field, is suitably muted, but you get the environment there denoted by what you can see in the background. I thought this was a superb nature image. I like the fact that he looks just as unhappy as no doubt the photographer did in this downpour. So you've really got the character of the bear as he stares forward, looking at the photographer. Superb nature image.
Yeah, I think technically it's perfect because the depth of field is throughout the bear. And sometimes you just get this sharp face of the animal that you're taking, but there's enough depth of field there that really shows this. That I say technically it's perfect. I think compositionally as well, really lovely image.
I agree, it's a lovely image. I think for me, I would just try to lighten the eyes just a little bit. I think there's some you can just see that there's a little bit more light in those eyes that you could just bring out. Obviously not too much, but I just like to see just a little bit more light in the eyes and in the face. I think it would just make it pop a bit. And finally, I would just darken the background down a little bit to make the bear stand out a little bit more in a three-dimensional way.
Yeah.
I think this is me.
This is Lost Light.
Yeah, another very stormy picture with quite a lot going on, and no doubt Keith and I aren't going to agree on this one either, because I think that although I love the sweeping lines of the beach and the sand, there's almost two pictures in this. There's the top half, the nice storm and the nice sort of headland and the light hitting it, and then you've got these lovely sweeping patterns in the lower half. Put the two together, and my little brain is competing to see which of them I like. And the only compromise that my little brain can come up with for this is to take some of the actual right hand side off, to where, so you'll see the big dark mountain dead center, and just to the right of that there is one little white cottage, and I would bring the right hand side into that cottage. I would then take out the other two cottages that are in front of that mountain, so effectively it will just be an image of one single cottage, and that, I think, would then give you a focal point within this image with these lines leading you up to it. But I then could quite easily just have the bottom half as a picture in its own right, but hey, it's what we've got in front of us.
Okay, yeah, well, predictably, I'm going to disagree, and I'd take off the left-hand side. A little bit of a crop on the bottom, but I just love the sweep of that beach so much, with the sand coming round in a curve and then leading the eye over into the distance, that I'd be loath to take off the right-hand side, and I'd rather crop at the left, midway between that hill that's on the left-hand side there, and just take a little bit off the bottom. But there you go.
I think that what you're both saying is that there's a lot in the image, and how you make it slightly less busy is either you take it from the right or the left or whatever. But I mean, the fact is, there's a lot to take in with this image, and I suppose either way, you concentrate your attention a bit more if there's slightly less detail in the image.
This is Still as the Night.
In order to get this amount of detail throughout the image, clearly it's a slow shutter speed at night to get what is a really sharp image from front to back. It's a well accomplished photograph, I think. The reflection is just right. It's muted and it's not dominant. The only thing that is dominant that distracts is that light in the top. Whether it's possible to reduce that or not, I don't know, but
it is.
It is, yeah. But that's just a bit too dominant. But I think that the rest of the image is absolutely superb, with the exception of the left-hand edge, because there's a line there that's not vertical, and it sort of gives me the impression that the building on the left-hand side in the foreground is leaning. So if it's almost like if that could almost be either cropped out or cloned out, it would make all of those verticals just as we would want to see them. But I love this picture.
Yeah, very atmospheric Venice picture. Yeah, I toned down that bright light. I did it in Photoshop. It was very easy. Just select the light and just tone it down. And the same goes for the window, lit windows at the top as well. Those two brightly lit windows, very easy just to tone them down a tad, and so the eye moves down to the bridge.
Yeah, I agree. I think the light definitely needs to be taken down. I'd take a slither off the left-hand side, as David suggested. And I'd just like to just lighten up slightly the very, very dark area above the lit window. I agree with Keith, darken the light in the window down, but then maybe just, because it does just disappear too quickly for me. I'd just like to see, I'm sure there's more detail in there.
Okay.
Okay.
This is Fisherman, Lake Edward.
Okay, this is lake on the Congo-Uganda border, and it very sharp in terms of the image itself. The boats and the people in it are as sharp as they can be. Some nice light on the boat that's in the centre there, and that's certainly the focal point as far as I'm concerned. But the way that the boats are spread out in that way, the eye is sort of darting around from one to the other, despite that central boat being the focal point. The others don't line up in the way the image is oriented at the moment. So what I'd be tempted to do is a severe crop, which took off the whole of the left-hand side up until almost the central boat there that's got the light on it, and then crop the water off from beneath that, so you'd get a 4x6 crop in the top right-hand corner of the image, and that would then give a diagonal line leading from that boat that's lit up to the other two boats receding into the distance. And then I think you'd have a much stronger image than what we've got at the moment. Certainly the amount of water in the foreground is way over the top. So I guess another solution might be to just crop that off and have a letterbox, but then you still don't get the pattern of the boats lining up compositionally in a pleasing way, which I think you do with the suggestion that I make about cropping.
For once, I'm inclined to agree with Keith, so that's me first. I think it does need quite severe cropping. I think it's just a shame that there's a large expanse of detailless water and a large expanse of detailless sky, which really don't add anything top or bottom to the picture. The picture's in the middle, and obviously you can't crop it to the point where you take the sky and the water off. So I think Keith's suggestion is a compromise.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add to that. I agree.
I think this is
One lake.
This is very much a painterly composite, very, very complicated image with lots going on in it. I like it, but I think it's one of these pictures that to really appreciate it, it needs to be printed on fine art paper so you can actually see it and hold it and appreciate it. Obviously, again, the author is fairly close to me, I suspect, and consequently, I could get my head slapped. But I think the elements that have been put into this all do work together, even to the hint of the tree in the background. So I think they all come together. I'm not convinced it necessarily works as a PDI.
I would agree with all of that. When I looked at it, I put it into Photoshop and just nudged the contrast a bit more. I appreciate that the author doesn't want the contrast increasing. It's supposed to be a low contrast, subtle pastel image, but I think it just needed a little nudge on the contrast. That tree in the background, for example, you can barely see it. You just want to see a little bit more of it, and the swan in the sky. Well, it's Marmite in the sense that I'd like just a little bit more colour and detail, and the author has opted for the opposite. So that's the author's prerogative.
I like the image very much, but I can't help feeling that the 5 swans in the bottom left have flipped round to create the 5 swans in the bottom right. And once I thought that is the case, and I still think that is the case, I concentrate on that to the detriment of the rest of the image. And I think they're right to be pointing in the middle, and then you've got those 2 swans in the middle looking at us. But that pattern being identical, I think it just spoils it for me a little bit.
Okay. West Coast Guardian.
Yeah, that's mine. Another mono landscape, seascape with a fantastic sky. And probably another one where I'm saying that the title doesn't match the image sufficiently well, in that 2/3 of the image is the sky, and the actual Guardian image part of it is really quite a small proportion of the image. The whole of the land and sea is in the bottom third. I think the lighthouse there, balanced with that little islet sticking out of the water, creates a wonderful balance to that image. Without that, I think it would seem wrong. I think that the sharpness of the lighthouse is really a good element to this image, and you've got that gradation of the fells or mountains behind, creating a really lovely effect. The sky is dramatic and it is very interesting. I just don't know whether there's just a bit too much of it. And if the lighthouse was a slightly bigger part of the image, it would be stronger.
I mean, I like the way, the balance of it, but then again, it's a personal thing, isn't it? I think as a mono, it's got the full range of monochromatic tones running right through it, and I think that is part of its pleasingness to me. The sky is very dominant, but I think it's meant to be. It's kind of meant to be a part of the image, and I like it very much.
I agree with all of that. The only thing I might do, in fact I did do, was to slip into Nick effects and lighten the centre, placing the centre over the lighthouse, and then slightly darkening the areas around. And I thought that brought out the sky a bit more, and gave it a bit more punch, a bit more drama, with the lighthouse sort of illuminated against a slightly darker background. Not a huge amount, just a little bit.
Great image though.
Number 36 is The Intruder.
Okay, what a beautiful flower this is, and beautifully photographed. The detail, a bit like that previous one where we had the bee buzzing around. The flower is absolutely wonderful, and the detail in the petals, soft though they are towards the outside, that really I think makes it a very artistic photograph. And then the stamens very, very sharp in the center there. And then lo and behold, along comes this flaming insect to sit on the flower and spoil it. So the rest of us would sort of either shoo it away or wait for it to go away. But the authors had the inspiration to make a feature of the fact that the insect has landed on the flower and named it The Intruder. I think it would be a bit more effective if that intruder was a little sharper. I know he's in an area of the photo where already it is getting softer, and I do love the soft vignette around this flower. I know it doesn't appeal to everyone. They'll say, oh, it's burnt out in the corners. But this negative vignette, to me, has a lot of appeal. So apart from sharpening the insect itself, I think this is a really pleasing and tells a story as well for this image.
Yeah, I too like the negative vignette. I think it does complement this type of shot. What I'm not certain about is whether the insect actually complements the picture full stop. I think if it were even a bee that was actually sat on the stamens, therefore it would be obviously in the plane of focus, I think it would add so much more to the picture. But this being slightly out of focus and on the edge of one of the petals doesn't really add very much to the picture for me.
Yep, I agree. I like the white vignetting as opposed to the darkening vignetting. I think it works better this way round. And I also think that either the fly needs to be sharp or not there.
This is main drop, forces falls.
I think this is me. Well, we've got quite a lot of waterfalls tonight in various stages of shutter speed to capture the water. Again, the author has gone for not the really slow shutter speed, but has gone for somewhere probably a little bit in between. I think for this type of shot, it may have worked better with a slower shutter speed to give some sort of silkiness as it tumbles down. Like a lot of the images that we've seen this evening, this one is well taken, well exposed. Compositionally, it's good. It suffers from one element, again, which is out of control of the author, and that is the light. It's very flat. But again, I think it would benefit from some selective work to bring up both contrast, lightening, and darkening across the image. I think you would get so much more out of it. I think where you position the rocks at the bottom is a nice base to it. I would keep that in. I think if you took that off, the water just drops straight down. But I think overall, you've got a nice composition. Just do some work to try and give it that little bit of punch.
Nothing to add to that. I agree absolutely with Alan.
Yeah, but for the light, it would it'd be so much better.
Next is Strelitzia.
Strelitzia, the bird of paradise flower. It's a beautiful flower, and it's a very dominant, very in-your-face sort of flower. Whenever you see it, I like them very much. Pity we can't grow them very much in this country. The image, I think, with this flower going through the middle of the picture with the petals, or I presume they're petals going out to the left and right from the flower, fortunately have this bold leaf in the background, providing a really good background across the top right-hand side and across the bottom diagonally. And there's one across the top left as well. But unfortunately, there's not one across the middle. And that's really the downside of this image, because it's suddenly very busy in the middle of the image, and there's this light shining through as well, and it's detracting from the flower itself. If it were possible to darken down that bright spot that's coming through, and also to perhaps even clone in a leaf behind that, it would make a lot of difference. And really, it would be a stronger image.
I agree with David. I think you've got to clone in something behind there, because otherwise your eye goes straight through the middle of it. I mean, the actual bit in the middle of it looks like the back of someone's head, and who's got some sort of green gilet on or something. I'm sure it isn't, but that's what it looks like. So if that's what my brain is thinking, then you definitely want to clone something in there to cover it up.
I agree completely with both David and Alan. Also draw attention to the fact that you've lost half the flower on the left-hand side there, which you pull out a little more to get that in, and it spoils it by the fact that it's chopped off.
Okay. Next one is Waning Moon.
this is me, yes, waxing moon, and what a perfectly exposed and ultra sharp image of the moon this is. I guess it falls into the category of documentary photography, and I do not mean that in a derogatory sense whatsoever. I think it's absolutely splendid image of the moon. I'm sure there's some judges who would want a rocket crash landing in the middle of it, or something superimposed as a composite photo to make it, in inverted commas, interesting. But I think it's perfectly interesting as it is. I mean, I spent a long time just exploring the moon because there's sufficient detail in it to allow you to do that. So I think it's absolutely superb astro photography image, and there's plenty of interest in the surface of the moon, its seas and the craters and all the rest of it, to allow you to explore what's going on there. You almost feel as though you're in the rocket in space looking down on the moon, and you can't get much more complimentary than that.
It looks very, very sharp, but it's only 250,000 miles away, so it should be sharp, really. But I think it's unusual not to have this sort of image of a full moon, and so I think it's got a bit of a bonus by not being the full moon and the waning moon indeed. But I think it's so detailed, so sharp. It's really good.
Well, it's astrophotography at its finest. That's about all you can say about it, really. I think Keith said it all.
Okay. Next is Distant Refuge.
This is another painterly image that we've been shown this evening. I like it a lot. I love the subtlety of it. I'm not convinced we need perhaps much of the darker blue at the bottom. I know it takes you through a whole range of different colours, but for me, I would bring the bottom up just a tad. I'd still keep some of the blue, but just maybe not quite the dark blue. I just think it has again, it's another one that would work very well as a fine art print, but always struggle a little bit as a PDI because you can't bring the subtlety out fully.
Sort of agree with Alan, but personally, maybe because I like the square formats, I'd bring a square format to this. I think the left-hand side there is adding not a lot to the rest of the image. I love the colors going through it. It's a fantastic minimalist image. But I think putting that building into the center of an image, horizontally anyway, would strengthen it, and it would work therefore as a square image coming in from the right-hand top corner, coming as a square down, and as Alan says, perhaps taking a little bit of the blue off the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of taste, isn't it? Okay, I'm happy to carry on with this next one. Mallard duckling.
Yeah.
Absolutely pin sharp mallard duckling here with the water droplets on its back. The depth of field is creating this soft foreground and very soft muted and non-interfering background. I think it's a beautiful image because it's also got light on it, and I think and it enhances the image because of that light. A couple of downsides for me are that on the left-hand edge and just in front of the beak, you've got 3 white circles which should just be taken out with the spot removal tool because they are distractions, and there's one just below the duckling as well. And secondly, because it's right in the middle of the picture and it's going left as we look at it, I think if it had a bit of less space at the back of the duckling and a bit more in the front of it, it would be better.
Yeah, I agree with David. I'd take the little distractions out there, just judge bait, but take a little bit off the back. But what I think it also is an example to photographers who are budding nature photographers is this is how to take nature right low down, eye level with your bird or animal, because If this was taken from looking down on it, it would not work at all. But an out of focus foreground, out of focus background, it is stunning.
Absolutely agree with Alan and David on all the points they made, so nothing more to add.
Woodland light.
Oh, right, that's me, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, it's what it says on the tin, isn't it? It's the woodland light. It's the light in that glade which really makes this image. I know there's maybe been a little vignette placed around it, but there's also the composition as well, in which you've got this large tree on the right-hand side, slightly smaller tree going in, and then the tree, which is smallest of all, but is in the light glade. Gives a three-dimensionality to the whole image and draws your eye into the glade. The vignetting really helps to concentrate that further, but the light was already there, and the composition has only emphasized that. Lovely detail throughout the image, and your eye just explores the whole thing. The background looks as though it potentially could be messy, but it's not. It's lighter and it's a little softer than the rest of the image, and a really pleasing landscape image.
Oh, I agree. It's absolutely beautiful, beautifully handled, both from exposure and the way you've composed it.
Yeah, I think we mentioned before about if photography is about light and composition, this has got light and composition. It's lovely.
Absolutely.
Next is
Okay,
Landerfoss.
It's a nice Landic waterfall, Richard.
Yeah.
I think we're all settled for that.
Oh.
I can see what the author's trying to do, because this type of effect where you get differential focus can be quite good, and it can actually give you something that's a little bit different. I think for me though, it's let down slightly by the fact that the obvious point of focus is not very obvious. I kind of look around it, and the yellow flowers at the sort of the lower part in the centre, one or two are sharp. Obviously the waterfall isn't. And I'm just thinking, what is the author trying to tell us with this? What was the author trying to capture? And the best I can do to suggest for me how it would work, and obviously it's not necessarily what the author wanted, is to crop it at the top. Below where you've got the yellow flower and then you've got the stalk, I would come down to the stalk and then crop the top off. And then on the left-hand side, take the out of focus yellow flowers out. That way, you have got something which your eye can latch onto and see as relatively sharp, and then accept that the waterfall is slightly out of focus, and live with the out of focus yellow flower on the edge. For me, that kind of helps it work. I appreciate it takes away the framing, but I just find the framing of the yellow flowers that are out of focus are just too much out of focus for my taste.
Yeah, I agree with what Alan has just said. It's I'm not sure where the point of the point of focus is, where my eye should rest.
Yeah, I agree with all that as well, and I agree with Alan's proposed solution to it.
Next is sand and sky.
Yeah, this is, I assume this is Namibia. I may be wrong. I'm intrigued by this image because I'm not sure whether it's a monochrome of a sunlit evening with the long shadows being shown by the grass tufts here, or whether it's a nighttime image and it's the moonlight that's lighting this up, and therefore you get this sort of harsh moonlit night. Either way, it doesn't matter to me because it's an intriguing image and I enjoy it for that intrigue. I like the way that the cloud sort of, if I look from the top right down onto the dunes and then along the dunes round to the grass. The only thing that I find, once I've seen it, I'm distracted by it, and that is on the right hand side, just in an inch and up 2 inches, is a pair of tyre tracks just above a tall grass mound. And once I see those tyre tracks, I can't help looking at them, and they could just be cloned out very easily to smooth sand. And but otherwise, I just think it's a really, really lovely image.
I agree. It's a lovely image. I think it's very, very strong indeed. Very powerful. It could even be Death Valley.
Yeah, I would agree with what David said. The only thing I would say is that, or the only advice I might give was to up the contrast a bit and the brightness. I tried it in Photoshop and it just brought out the clouds in the sky as a more graphical element, and they stood out a bit more. There's a lovely diagonal line between the tuft of grass there, that's the main thing in the foreground, and a diagonal line going up through those clouds. And to just emphasize that relationship, it would be good to bring the clouds out a bit more. And I found that the contrast slider did that. Okay, this is mine.
Stable Hills Farm.
Stable Hills Farm, I mean mine to comment on. Very well exposed across the whole image. The mist is obviously an added bonus there. But the main feature that's appealing is the low light coming in from the left-hand side there and striking the tops of the trees and illuminating them, and illuminating the mist as well. Without that, this would be a rather mundane image, but the light, as is always the case in photography, it's the light that makes it, and the light certainly improves this image no end. The house, the farmhouse itself, is placed on the thirds there, so it does provide a focus of interest, and your eye really runs along from the left hand side where the light is catching the eye and then takes you through to the farmhouse. So a very pleasing image. Maybe I'd take a little bit off the top. You don't really need so much sky because all the interest is in the reflections in the water and in the mist and everything in between. So the sky is almost redundant in this particular case, but yeah, a very pleasing landscape image.
I agree with everything Keith said.
Yeah, I like not only the light on the trees, but of course it creates that wonderful reflection as well with that light.
Mm-hmm.
What's a mere early light?
I think this is me. Another reflection image. We seem to be treated to reflections. So a lot of photographers got up and captured this beautiful light that you get first thing in the morning when everything's so still. And again, I'd just like to hark back to some of the images that we were commented on that had very flat light, and just use this perhaps if the author's watching, so that you can see the difference it makes when you get very, very strong directional light into your images, how stronger they become. For me, I think there's probably too much of this. I can see you were seduced by the reflection, but I like the little boathouse, and I would bring the right hand side in, so the boathouse becomes on the third rather than in the centre, and then use the rest to sort of enhance the picture. And I might even take a bit of the water of the reflection off the bottom, just to sort of move the horizon, so it's not going right through the centre of the image. But a very nice, very pleasing, well captured, well exposed image.
Absolutely agree with it. Everything that
Really?
Alan
I
said.
don't believe it.
Yeah, spot on. And with the little house there, the little hut in the middle, I don't think it's quite works for me. I think it needs to be just off centre a bit, and by taking off something off the right hand side of the image would give that.
Yeah. Campanile di San Marco.
Yes, Campanile di San Marco. I like this image. I like the way that it's nice and sharp. I like the way that the foreground has this this angle which points across to the St. Mark's Square. Another monochrome, another slow shutter speed which has smoothed that water and equally smooth the sky. There's one issue that I think not bothers me, but it just I think detracts a little, is that the distance across the water is just a bit too great, and I think for me it would benefit either from the the camera angle being a little bit lower, because it would foreshorten that amount of water between where the photographer is standing and the main subject of the photograph. And what I did in Photoshop, I actually cloned the foreground further across the image, and I thought it made a significant difference to it, actually. And again, if whoever the author of the image is wants to let me know if they want me to send them that my sort of take on it, I just think foreshortening that water adds a lot to it. But otherwise, it's a lovely image.
I have to totally disagree with David. I love this square format, and it's another Michael Kenner type of image. I think that if you do what David suggests, then I think you get too much emphasis on that foreground element down there at the bottom. I love the negative space, which is created by the fact that you've got a bit of distance between the foreground and the San Marco tower in the background. So, I mean, it's what appeals to different people in a sense. There's no right or wrong. It's just whatever appeals to the particular person looking at the photograph. So, as I say, for me, I find that it's very graphical the way it's laid out at the moment, and it appeals to me greatly.
I agree with Keith. I think it's absolutely stunning, and I love the strength of the foreground in combination with the background of the Venetian buildings that you're looking onto. I just think it works perfectly.
Church of St. Plymouth.
Okay, this is me, I think, a church in Slovenia, I understand, or I believe. This is compositionally exceptional, really great composition, mainly because it's using the path along the ridge there, with the lovely autumn trees on either side of that path, leading you all the way across the image to the church building itself. But it's not just leading you to the church building, is it? It's leading your eye also to that amazing illuminated mountain in the background there, caught by the sun going down, which is really adds so much to this image. It would be rather flat and maybe not quite so interesting if that wasn't there, but it is there. And well, we're saying it again, aren't we? It's light that makes the photograph, and that beautiful afternoon light or setting sunlight on that mountain is really superb. So the path takes you along from left to right to the church, and then you look at the background mountain that's illuminated, and you come back down that ridge of mountains in the background into the valley and along, and your eye moves from the right to left. So you've taken in the whole of the image as presented here. I think it's been superbly done. The only thing I would do would be to take that dark tree out of the bottom left-hand corner, because it does tend to catch your eye as you're starting its journey across the image. And I think it fastens the eye down and is so easily taken out.
Well, I would actually take the bottom off and include that bit of bright green in the bottom right-hand corner. So I would take a slither of the bottom off, which I don't think you need. Yeah, that's just me.
I agree with you, Alan. I think it's a lovely image for all of the reasons that Keith has said. But I think if the bottom inch was taken off that, it would bring that path even more dominantly into the image as well.
Yeah, I would go along with that.
Okay. No pronunciation problems now. Reflective skiddo.
Yeah, well, yeah, you got it for a pleb, so that's me, I think. Another reflection image, though the author is this time showing us a lot more of the reflection than the actual, and some beautiful mist coming off it. Again, we got some contrails, but the contrails have been used to actually create quite strong diagonal in the reflection. I'm not convinced about the branches. I don't know whether they do act as a bit of a frame, but they also, the reflection of the branches I find a little bit distracting in that bottom corner. So I think the jury's out on that. I could see, I tried it without the branches, and I think it works equally well, but you do have to bring out some of the detail in the wooded area on the right hand side. It's a little blocked up, and I can see there's a lot more detail in there, so you do need to selectively bring that out a little bit, which is not very difficult to do. But I think personally it works better concentrating on the mist and the beautiful fell rather than the branches, but that's just my view.
Yeah, I subscribe to that as well. I think it's about the mist, the island, and Skidder in the background, and that's where the strength of the image lies. I think the reflected branch in the bottom right-hand corner is more of a distraction than an addition to the image.
I agree with David, and I think the contrail is also an interference as well. I'd take more than a third, perhaps a half of the image away on the bottom there, and have a truly letterbox image in which you've got the row of hills coming to a point by the island there, and you've got the mist, and your eye focuses on that. And I think all that water expanse in the foreground is totally redundant.
Okay. Rome skyline.
Yeah, this very large, dominant tree in the foreground perfectly frames this monument in the background. And then you've got on the right-hand side this tower. On the left, we have this wall, which for me just adds nothing to the image really, and could easily be removed. But the more I look at this image, the more I think that the very interesting part of this skyline is actually the chap with his head on his hand, and the lamppost, and his pondering of what's going on, and perhaps that's a stronger part of the image for me. It sort of adds the interest to what's going on around him, but it's very small in the frame. It's almost like I'd be tempted to remove a lot of the top and side, left-hand side of this image to give more dominance to this character who's got a story to tell.
I find the building on the right-hand side there quite ugly, and also the one in the bottom right-hand corner as well. And I take the whole of that right-hand side off and make a square image encircling the tree, a little bit of the wall, and as David says, that would shift also that figure in the foreground more into prominence. You'd still keep the beautiful lampposts in, and the building on the horizon, which is really an attractive building as opposed to that ugly thing on the right.
Yeah, it sounds as if we're doing a hatchet job on this one, which is a shame, but unusually I agree with Keith again. I think the building on the right doesn't really add a lot to your picture unless that was the purpose of taking the image. I too would take the right and the left off and make the picture all around the guy being at the bottom corner of the frame, looking out onto the rest of that landscape.
Okay. Yellow hammer.
I think we've missed 51 and 52 out. But
We have.
We'll do the yellow hammer anyway while we're on it.
Well,
but this is mine rather than.
Well, I'm doing 52, which hasn't come up
You're
yet.
doing the wren, and then and Keith was doing the woodpecker. So that's the way round, wasn't it? 51, 52, and 53.
Yeah.
I was doing the yellow hammer.
Yellow hammer I've got as 51.
Go with it.
Well, let's not fight. I don't mind.
Just get on with it.
Okay, well, I'll do it then. I think it's a cracking picture of a yellow hammer.
I did too.
I love it. It's looking at the camera. He's sitting on this little wire fence by the looks of things. The the pose right across diagonally across the image makes it sort of quite a pictorial image as well as a natural history image. The tail is just going out of focus. It's just off the plane. But what I think troubles me a little bit is that it seems to be just hanging in midair rather than being anchored by something. And the fact that this wire sort of disappears out of focus completely, sort of unfortunately doesn't give it something to anchor on. And I think if the bird was sitting on the wire and at least you could see a bit more of that, so that it was quite properly positioned, I think it would help. But the white or white and grey behind the bird, if that could just be dampened down a bit. But I love the picture.
Yeah, I think the bird is stunning. I would be inclined to tilt it a little bit in the crop so that the actual wire was a little bit more diagonal rather than coming straight out at you, which I think might help David's concern. But yeah, it does have this strange effect because of the very, very small depth of field. But it's still a lovely capture, and it just needs the white, the bright white, taking down quite a bit, or even some of the green through a layer cloning over the white and then just trading back the opacity, which would fix that.
Yeah, nothing to add to that. So is this me?
Yeah.
Okay. Great spotted woodpecker. Is this the male then?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Whatever.
Spotted the red crown.
Settle for a chick.
Okay, it's quite. I find this quite a busy image. I appreciate that it's good to have the bird looking out into the space on its left, our right. But despite that, I'd be tempted to. I know I've got a fetish for square format, but I would, for good reason, I think, impose a square format onto this, if only to exclude that right-hand portion where you've got a bright bit of foliage, and in the top right-hand corner also, that's quite bright. So I'd bring the square to start, not quite excluding all of that, but if you see the main branch that it's on continues diagonally into the distance at the top, and if you come into just where that promontory sticks out, I think I'd start the square from there, and it would end up, it's hard to do this without having an indicator, but it would end up the square where on the left-hand side, where the branch does a little U shape on the top, and it would come in the middle of that. And that then, because it's square anyway, would place the bird on the center of the image and give it more emphasis. But the bird itself, which is the subject of the image, is superbly captured, sharp throughout, maybe losing a little bit on the fur on its breast. But otherwise, the eyes perfectly sharp to pieces, catlight in the eye, and I like the feel of the image overall. In terms of the colours and the background being subdued, and the colours of the background I find complement the bird very well. But yeah, the essence is I would just crop in to a square format and place the bird at the centre of that square.
It certainly needs something doing to it. I think it's a shame that the bird also disappears into the out of focus background. When photographing birds, you really ideally want the bird not against something quite so close as that. So the bird would have been moving about a lot. I think it would have been nice to have maybe seen the bird with its head above the branch.
Yeah, it does seem to be quite a heavy crop, I think. And so we got this edge around the wood, which Keith would effectively remove by the square crop.
Okay. And finally, Ren.
Wren. What a cracking shot of a wren.
Absolutely.
Absolutely beautiful. Probably top wildlife image for me this evening. I like Keith in his square format. I've obviously got a fetish over vignettes. So I would put a little bit of a vignette on this, particularly 3 out of the 4 corners, which could just do with it. And I also, maybe it's just me, but I don't like the little grass behind it with the white bit on it. I would be inclined to take that out because it just displeases the composition for me. But it's a lovely picture, lovely light in the eye, just superb capture.
Absolutely agree. Fantastic image. Wonderful picture of a wren. And I agree with Alan's advice on what you might do to it.
I think it's a great one to finish on.
Absolutely.
It is I think it's an absolutely superb, super sharp image. It's got all the characters of that bird. And I think with that little bit of darkness around the edges, just to take that light corner off the bottom there. But I just think it's just a super sharp, super composed bird. And it's a really suitable image for us to finish the 53 images of this evening. And I just want to say thank you very much for the author of that, and thank you very much to everybody who has contributed such a fantastic variety of photographs for us to have a look at tonight, because we've had lots of good landscapes, lots of good natural history, some, lots of cityscapes, some creative imagery, and that's as good as it gets, really. I think that we've been blessed with some really smashing pictures, and I'm really pleased to have been able to be a part of this trio this evening. So thank you very much to everyone.
Yep, I agree. Absolutely fantastic set of images. Very varied, as you say, and superb standard.